and welcome to LFC Focus. So with the news breaking last night that Liverpool had finished their summer transfer business after the signing of Alisson, I think all of us essentially took that as a statement from Liverpool that we would not be signing Nabil Fekir. And obviously our first reaction is the fact that we're upset because we were all very, very excited to see that player join Liverpool. We all saw him as a huge prospect, and the fact that he got so close to signing has left us all a little bit frustrated. But I think it does leave Liverpool with a big issue as well, because before we signed Alisson, all reputable English journalists were essentially saying that between now and the end of the window, Liverpool's two priorities in the summer were to get in a new goalkeeper and a new number 10 as well. So it is clear that Jurgen Klopp saw that as a position that needed filling. With the loss of Alex Oxlade-Chamberlain, who won't be playing any football next season as well, it is one that I think Liverpool are very, very light on. It's a position that there aren't too many players that could fill it. So there's clearly a problem there, but the fact that we're not looking to bring anyone in, the fact that the Fekir deal does look dead in the water, means that we are going to have to take a look at the players we have to hand and decide who is going to be best playing that number 10 role. So today I'm going to look at 4 of those players. I'm going to come up with my own solution as to how Liverpool should get around the problem. But first of all, just a few stats, a little bit of a statistical breakdown to remind ourselves of the key traits of these players. I'm going to go with Sadio Mane, who obviously took on the number 10 shirt. He played in a bit of a creative role last season. Adam Lallana, who many see as the most obvious player to play in that role and has played well so far in pre-season. Naby Keita, who is a brand new signing, all very excited about him, and he has shown his creative ability so far in pre-season. And then a slightly more left field pick in Xherdan Shaqiri, who I think he hasn't necessarily played in midfield that much, but I think it is somewhere where he could potentially flourish in Jurgen Klopp's system. So taking a look at these stats, first of all, you've got key passes per 90 minutes. I've essentially taken them with Mane last season, Lallana the season before last because he didn't really get a proper go in the team last season, Keita the season before last as well because I think Leipzig dropped off a little bit last season, and Naby Keita's performances I think suffered because he really was a little bit frustrated about not getting his dream move to Liverpool a year earlier than he'd hoped. So I think the real Naby Keita and the Naby Keita we've got played in that 16-17 season for Leipzig, and then Xherdan Shaqiri, his stats will be taken from the Premier League campaign last season for Stoke as well. So Sadio Mane, per 90 minutes, key passes makes 1.6. He is the one that does do very well here. The other one, of course, being Xherdan Shaqiri, who I think surprises us all with a very, very impressive key pass stat. Like I said, I can almost see him flourishing in a midfield role for Liverpool because his creative abilities are a lot more impressive than people have maybe given him credit for in the past. If you want to know a little bit more about how I think Xherdan Shaqiri will perform for Liverpool and the areas where I think he will be strongest for us, then do check out the Xherdan Shaqiri video that came out earlier on in the week. That goes into much more depth about the player and his abilities and what he can offer for Liverpool. But yeah, he performs very well in the key passes there. Lallana and Keita lagging behind a little bit. Then you got take-ons. This is the one where Keita, I think we would all expect him to flourish here. He does absolutely fantastically. He's light years ahead of any other player there in terms of his take-ons. We know it's a hugely good trait of his. We saw it last night as well against Blackburn when he drove at their defence, and he's a really talented dribbler as well. And I think take-ons is an important part of the game when you're playing as number 10 for Liverpool, because creativity is all about receiving the ball and then driving forward and getting quick attacks going, because we are a counter-pressing side, a counter-attacking side. We like to attack with speed, and the players that he will be servicing, you know, the Manes and the Salahs, are very quick, so you've got to be able to keep up with them, and take-ons is very key to that. So Keita obviously performs very well there. Mane, we all know he's very good on the ball as well, so he does well there. Shaqiri and Lallana lagging behind a little bit there, but then you've got chances created. Again, Shaqiri performs absolutely fantastically here. So much better than you would have expected him to. Again, his creative abilities really seem to be something that he wasn't given enough credit for last season, and perhaps that is down to the fact that he was in an underperforming Stoke side. Then Sadio Mane, again performing very well. Lallana lagging behind a little bit, but I think I've been a little bit harsh on him. In terms of his stats, he's never really the standout player, but he does perform steadily in all of these categories so far. And then Keita, again, his chances created stat is a little bit disappointing. So there's a little bit of disappointment there. Keita obviously take on so good, but key passes and chances created is clearly a sign of his game that needs improving. And a lot of people, they don't necessarily see him as a technical player. He is sort of seen more as a bruiser, as a destroyer of a midfielder, and more of a box-to-box player. I think people should give him a little bit more credit for his creative ability. We saw it last night against Blackburn, but the stats so far suggest that there are aspects of his game that do need improving. Moving on to assists, Sadio Mane, I think unsurprisingly performs well here, not just because He is a very good creative player, but also because he's got fantastic players in front of him to provide service to. If you are passing to Firmino and to Salah and to Oxlade-Chamberlain behind you as well, and all the fantastic midfielders and fullbacks and whatnot that Liverpool have got, you're obviously going to register some good assists, so he does well there. I'm very much impressed with how Lallana performs here because, like I said, he's a little bit middling on the previous stats, but it seems that when it comes to end product, he actually starts to flourish. He gets a good assist number there. Keita does all right. Shaqiri's number, obviously, you've got to caveat that 0.21 assists per 90 minutes with the fact that he has been playing in that Stoke side. He hasn't had the fantastic players to service that Lallana, Mane and Keita as well at RB Leipzig have all had in front of them. And then finally, it's a big one, it's goals. Now, obviously, this isn't the most important stat. It is more about the creative ability that the number 10 can bring. But I think Liverpool were lacking in terms of goals from midfield last season. We certainly benefited when we had Coutinho on the pitch as well as the rest of the front three, because it just added an extra dimension, and it meant that those front three, there was a little bit of pressure taken off them because there was someone else in the side who was expected to score goals regularly. So it is something that does need to be considered when we look at the player that's going to play that creative role in the midfield. Mane obviously outperforms everyone here, 0.42 goals. A lot of that probably does come because he plays higher up the pitch, even though I think he actually flourished quite a lot in terms of his goal scoring exploits in that creative role towards the latter end of last season. Lallana does well again. I mean, his end product does really show that while he might not be as involved in terms of key passes and chances created and stuff like that, when he does get involved, when he does get on the ball, it does look like he is making it count. Naby Keita then gets 0.3. That is all right, I think. And then Shaqiri again trailing with 0.24, but you kind of got to caveat that once again with the fact he was playing in that Stoke side. So yeah, the stats were all very interesting. No one necessarily blows us away. A couple of them really perform well in specific categories. I've essentially taken their performances in every single category and cross-referenced it and put all the players' performances and multiplied them by one another. It's very, very mathsy. It's the same thing that I did for Stoke, the Shaqiri video. If you want to know how I did it, I'll run it across the screen now. If you're not bothered, then don't worry. Essentially, it's a creator score to show how well the players would perform as a number 10 in Jurgen Klopp's system, because I think those 5 stats of key passes, take-ons, chances created, assists and goals are the key traits that you've got to bring to that number 10 role in Jurgen Klopp's side. And all the players, Mane obviously comes out on top. Lallana and Shaqiri are lagging behind a little bit. Keita's around about the middle. But those scores are very, very similar. It's not like one of them has run away with it, and it's not like one of them has massively underperformed compared to the rest. I think what that essentially tells us is that all of them have got traits that make them really, really good in that number 10 role, and then all of them have got traits that maybe suggest that they are not quite suited to it. So now I'm going to take a look at every single player individually, go over their pros and cons, and determine whether or not they are actually suited to the number 10 role at Liverpool. So first of all, you've got Sadio Mane. Now, when we went over that stat breakdown, he was a very good all-rounder. He was one of the top 2 performers in every single stat, and when it came to goals and assists, he was the top 4 performer out of all of them. So I think he is one where you'd look at him and you'd say there's nothing that really needs too much work, and I think that's a positive for Jurgen Klopp, that he wouldn't have to build up the player too much, he wouldn't have to train him. I think a lot of that comes from the fact that he did operate in that creative role in the second half of last season, and that means that not only is he just familiar with the demands of what Jurgen Klopp expects from his creative number 10 player, but he's also familiar with the players as well, and that is something that you really do have to consider. As good as Naby Keita is, as good as Lallana was in the past for Liverpool, and as good as Shaqiri is in certain areas of playing the number 10 role, none of them have played with Mane, none of them have played with Firmino, none of them have played with Salah as well. They don't have quite as innate an understanding, and while we saw that Keita had a very, very good understanding with Sturridge last night, it's something that Mane has built up a lot with the front three already, and that is something that simply cannot be ignored, because when we come up against these low blocks, we want a good understanding between the players because we need them to play quickly. We need the sharp, incisive passing, and if Mane knows what runs are going to be made, then that's half the battle already won, because he doesn't necessarily have to get his head up. He just needs to focus on getting the ball right, and he knows that he will be able to find one of his teammates. So he is really well suited to the role. Like I said, he did actually flourish in the sort of wing 10 role that he played last season. I think The key problem with Sadio Mane is that we're not necessarily looking for a wing 10. I think what Jurgen Klopp actually wanted was someone who could actually play as a proper number 10, almost shifting our formation from a 3-man midfield to a 2-man midfield with someone accompanying the front three in like a 4-2-3-1 kind of formation. Sadio Mane isn't really that. He is still a winger, and I don't think he necessarily functions as a more deep-lying number 10 as much as his abilities do show that he's good there. And I just think you're almost wasting him as a winger as well, and it does leave that hole in the front three, and I don't think Liverpool have the personnel to fill that. I think we could potentially experiment with Sturridge or Shaqiri there, maybe filling his hole in the front three, but I think both of those players, they're left footers, so they can't do exactly what Mane did. They can't be cutting inside from the left wing. I think if you're saying maybe move Firmino out wide onto the left and allow him to cut inside onto his right, you're playing Firmino out of position, and that's where you start to really, really upset the odds and change the way the side's playing, and I don't think you want to be doing that. So it's something that maybe we could experiment with, but I just think by dropping Mane deep and by asking him to be a proper number 10 rather than a creative winger, you are essentially wasting him and also upsetting the balance of the team. So next up, Adam Lallana. This is the player that I think a lot of people see as a natural fit for the number 10 role. He has obviously impressed so far in pre-season. He has done so in that attacking midfield role as well, and I think the key thing is he has done so when the box has been very tightly packed, because when I think about the fact that Jurgen Klopp wants this creative number 10 player, I think it is primarily for games against the low block sides. It's for games against the Burnleys and the West Hams and the West Broms. I know they're not in the Premier League, but there are plenty of teams out there like that, and Liverpool are going to have to play plenty of those kind of games next season. So we need someone who's going to impress when the box is packed and when it's very difficult to maintain your composure and to pick out your teammates. And that's something that I thought Lallana has done very, very well so far this season. And like I said with the stats breakdown, his performance wasn't spectacular, but it was very, very steady. And like I said, the key thing about Sadio Mane was that he performed well in all categories, so there wasn't any particular one where he looked at and thought he's going to have to work on that. It's the same kind of thing with Adam Lallana as well, where you don't look at him and you think, well, his take on stats are rubbish, so that's something that Jurgen Klopp's going to have to train him up to do better. He just generally, I think, needs to improve his consistency a little bit, because I think that's one thing that people do worry about him. His form has been very sporadic in the past. I did take those stats for the 16-17 season, and I think if you took his stats solely from the first half of that season, you'd be very, very impressed. You'd feel like Liverpool have a real player on their hands. But the problem is, on the flip side of that, the second half of the 16-17 season, I don't think he actually gets a goal or an assist until the last day of the season against Middlesbrough, where he does score in that 3-0 win. So I think there are concerns about how consistently he can deliver, and obviously with the fact that he didn't get much game time last season, we're not entirely sure what Adam Lallana we're getting. He has improved obviously in pre-season, he's done well so far, but pre-season and competitive games are completely different things, and I think if we're looking for someone who's going to play number 10 against those low block sides, we need someone who's going to perform consistently, because like I said, a lot of teams do pack the box against us. A lot of teams do play like defensive lines of 8 players and stuff like that. So we're going to need someone, if we're going to look to challenge for the league title, if we're going to look to push Man City right to the end of the season, we need to be performing fantastically on a consistent basis. And I think there are worries about whether or not Adam Lallana can do that. And obviously the other big worry with him, the one that I have mentioned in the past, is the fact that at 30 years old and with an injury record like his, can we rely on him all season? It's the kind of reason that we decided not to sign Nabil Fekir. The same reason that we're in a difficult situation with the fact that Oxlade-Chamberlain is out for the season. If we're relying on Adam Lallana all season to be our creative number 10, then I think we are walking into a trap there essentially, because at some point, especially if we push him to his absolute limit as an athlete, the lad is going to get injured and it is going to leave Liverpool with a big problem. So there are good traits there from Adam Lallana. He clearly offers Liverpool a lot, but I think there are worries not just about his persistence in terms of form and his consistency there, but also in terms of his ability to play week in, week out for Liverpool. So then, Naby Keita, one that we are all incredibly excited about. He's been excellent so far in pre-season, like Adam Lallana, but if you ask me, just a little bit better, especially last night. He was so fantastic, and I think creatively, out of all the players I've looked at so far today, he suits our system the best. You know, the way that he wins the ball back, he takes players on, and then his passing is quick and incisive as well. You know, he's always looking out for a runner who's bearing down on goal. He looks for the pass that is going to take the quickest route to actually getting a goal for Liverpool. And I think that's really key to the way we play. So I think Naby Keita, he is more creative than people give him credit for. Like I said, people see him as more of a box-to-box bruiser, destroyer midfielder, maybe even as a sort of Kante-style player. But I think when he actually gets forward, he does have a lot more creative ability than people really think. I think the big question about Naby Keita that probably won't get answered until we actually start the competitive season is whether he will come unstuck against those blocks, against those tightly packed defences, because while he does perform well, like I said, in those tight spaces, he thrives when there's lots of players about him. And I think those teams that do play the low blocks will probably try to make sure that he never gets less than 25 yards away from goal, because once he gets into the box, he is going to cause them some serious problems. The way that he drives at defenders, the way that he operates well when the ball is pinging around and stuff like that, that's where he gets a lot of his goals and a lot of his assists as well. So he performs well in those tight spaces, but I just think, as much as I've given him a lot of praise for his technical abilities, there's just a little bit missing there, and he's not a natural number 10 at the end of the day. He's not a Phil Coutinho. He's not going to play the kind of passes on a regular basis that just make you want to sit back and admire them all day long. So again, that's a question that's not going to be answered until the start of the season, but it is something that Jurgen Klopp will have to take into consideration if he wants Keita to be his creative midfielder going into the season. And then finally, Xherdan Shaqiri. I said he was a little bit of a left field pick here. I mean, the stats do show that his creative abilities, like Keita, are a lot better than people give him credit for, and I think he did suffer a little bit playing in that Stoke side last season. He wasn't able to provide service to top quality players who would have put the passes away that he was delivering. And it's interesting to see that that is actually maybe his biggest strength. And it's possible that even a midfield role would suit him better than one in the front three. And I did mention, the video that I did on Shaqiri a couple days back, where we go a lot more in depth into what his abilities and his strengths and his weaknesses are. And when I spoke to George, who was a Stoke fan and who had seen a lot more of Shaqiri than any of us had last season, he did say that he thinks Shaqiri might actually be quite well suited to that midfield role, perhaps even more than playing in the front three. Now, obviously, there are problems with it there. When we went through the stats breakdown, his end product wasn't great, and I did obviously caveat that with the thing about Stoke, but it's something that you do have to consider at the end of the day. And also, his take on stats weren't amazing, and it does feel like he's never going to be like an Oxlade-Chamberlain or a Naby Keita in midfield. He's not necessarily going to drive at defences as much as we'd like, and I think when he does perform in that kind of role where he drops a little bit deeper against low blocks, he does get caught out an awful lot, and he does do that thing that people always criticise Xherdan Shaqiri for. He takes an awful lot of shots from range, and that is not something that Jurgen Klopp will want him to do. It's something that Phil Coutinho did a lot in the past, and I think something that Jurgen Klopp actually took Phil Coutinho aside one day and just told him to stop shooting from range and to try and either dribble towards goal or pick out his teammates more. So that's something that maybe Jurgen Klopp could get out of Shaqiri a little bit more. I feel like he's definitely a player that will improve under the management of a top quality manager like Jurgen Klopp. But right now, when Liverpool are looking for someone who's going to be playing in the number 10 role on the first few days of the season, on those first few games against those low block sides, and who's going to be able to do it consistently all the way through the season, we are looking for someone who's a bit more of the finished article. And while Shaqiri, he's got the raw ability there, I don't think he's good enough just yet to play in the creative role for Liverpool. So then, the all-important question of who is actually going to be Liverpool's number 10 next season. Now, as we've seen, all of those players that are candidates for the role have got pros and they've got cons. They've all got reasons why they could play the role, and they've all got reasons that could offer limitations as to why Jurgen Klopp might not want to use them as the creative force in midfield next season. So I think the way to actually go about it is to essentially do it horses for courses, to pick certain players for certain games and just work out who is best suited to what kind of opposition. And I think the way that Liverpool will approach this, certainly from the start of the season, is to essentially use Keita and Lallana in rotation in those roles. I think when we play against low block teams, you want both Keita and Lallana on the pitch, because Lallana, his technical ability, the way that he performs in those tight spaces, the way that he's impressed so far in pre-season suggests that he'll be very useful for breaking down low blocks. And I think the way that he does that will also free up space for Keita to drive into the box. And like I said, low block teams, weaker teams in the Premier League, will not want Naby Keita driving at them. They will not want him getting close to goal. So I think if Lallana occupies them a little bit more by playing those nice passes, by linking up with his teammates, and by also, like Keita arriving late in the box to get some goals as well. That frees up Naby Keita to do what he does best, and I think that is how Liverpool will provide themselves with the best opportunities creatively in the games against the low block teams. And then when it comes to playing against the big teams, I think what you do here is you actually drop Lallana out of the side and you play Keita a little bit further forward, because I think against teams like Man City and like Arsenal and like Chelsea will be under Sarri, and Tottenham as well, they are going to play high defensive lines, and I really want to see Keita getting at those defenders, because when he presses up against those high lines, he's going to be able to provide fantastic service to the front three. And then I think if you take Lallana out the team, not only are you resting him, not only are you preventing burnout in a player that will probably be crucial to Liverpool next season, I think you can then have the opportunity to bring in someone like Jordan Henderson, or maybe even a James Milner or a Gini Wijnaldum, who can offer a little bit more defensive support to Fabinho. So you've then almost got not two deep lying midfielders, because both of those players, Henderson and Fabinho, have got a lot of good qualities going forward. They can still offer something in attack, but you've got those two players who are going to help out the defence and free up a little bit more space for Keita, so he can operate primarily in an attacking role and use all of his pressing abilities to link up with that front three and give us a lot of goals. And then, like I said there, what you're doing is you're essentially stopping Lallana from burning out. You're stopping a player who, like I said, is 30 years old and injury prone from having to play too many games. Hopefully that means he doesn't get injured at any point in the season. It doesn't mean he gets too tired, and we can continue to use him whenever we need to call on him, and we can also get the best out of Naby Keita, because I think at the end of the day, if you're not using him in an attacking role and you're just using him defensively, you're effectively using 50% of a top quality midfielder. So I think that's probably the way that Liverpool will look to go about it. Like I said, you can experiment with Mane and Shaqiri in that role. I think that would be good in the cup games, or maybe in the games against really low down sides who we think we've probably got will beat a little bit easier. Maybe it's even something we could do with like half an hour to go in games where we're 3-0 up and stuff like that. And I think that's probably a good way to also just take the burden off of Keita and Lallana a little bit as well, because as good as Keita is, he can't play every single game at the end of the day, so we are going to have alternatives for when he's not in the side. But yeah, that is how I think Liverpool are going to do it. I think you have Lallana and Keita against the low blocks. You then rest Lallana and play Keita further forward in the big games, and then in cup matches and smaller games, you can experiment a little bit with Mane and Shaqiri to see whether maybe they can function in a number 10 role as well. So that is all for today's video. Thank you guys very, very much for watching. If you did enjoy this video, then why not give it a like? If you're new around here as well, hit that subscribe button there. Check out some of the other videos that have been out on the channel over the past few days as well. Don't forget to follow at LFC Focus TV on Twitter, and I'll be back soon, hopefully with some either exciting transfer news or post-match reaction to the first game of Liverpool's US tour. Bye for now.